Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Assembly Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee to order. I'm Assemblymember Mark Levine. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is a very important issue that we are discussing, the critical need for investments in our parks and open space. I'm especially pleased that we are able to hold this hearing here at the Albert J. Borough Community Center here at Pickleweed Park. This facility is exactly the local park that is serving the many needs of kids and families in the area. Funding for these kinds of facilities throughout the state is woefully lacking. Today's hearing provides an opportunity for us to hear directly from the community regarding your needs for investments in our parks. We look forward to hearing from the witnesses who are on the agenda, but also from members of the public today. Parks and open spaces have long been a high priority in the North Bay. When parks were threatened with closure only a few years ago, our communities came together and developed innovative solutions. We created partnerships and nonprofit efforts to work collaboratively to keep parks open and accessible for generations to come. But we know that we still have many unfunded park and resource protection needs in the North Bay and throughout the state of California. The state's unmet needs for investment in parks and natural resources are significant and certainly exceed the amount that can be included in any one park's measure. That is understandable, given the need to balance the state's many needs for infrastructure development. Nevertheless, it has been several years since California passed a park bond that includes funding for park needs throughout our state. To address that need, Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia is authoring AB 2444, which puts the California Parks, Water, Climate, and Coastal Protection and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2016 on the ballot in November. This bond strikes a balance between meeting statewide needs while placing a priority on park-poor communities. AB 2444 also includes funding for deferred maintenance and improvements for existing parks, and not just for new acquisitions. The bond seeks to address both urban and rural needs and includes funding for parks, wildlife corridors, coastal protection, agricultural health, and other resource investments needed to help communities adapt to climate change. We will be discussing that bond measure in great detail today. I thank my colleague, Assemblymember Garcia, for traveling to San Rafael to join us. I also want to thank him for his leadership in authoring the park bond this year and shepherding it through the Assembly.
It's great to be here, and I certainly want to thank the chairman for his leadership, not only representing your district, but also on this issue. He's helped us get this discussion up and going. It was the first committee that we went to, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize his team also in the committee. And so I want to thank you for allowing us to bring this forward, and of course having you as a author on the bill is extremely important for us. I'd like to just get right into a conversation and certainly hear from our witnesses and of course the community input. As the chairman mentioned, we've taken a very balanced approach to this issue as it relates to how we could potentially touch every corner of the state with the resources that could come about with this park bond. He mentioned it has been quite some time, exactly about 14 years since there's been a direct investment into the park system in California, and so we feel that it's quite timely to move this forward. Although I represent a very different district than the one we find ourselves in today, nonetheless, what we do have in common is the desire to see an improvement in the quality of life for the people who live in our districts, and we know that parks and recreational services add value to the quality of life. My passion and my commitment to this issue comes as a former local elected official. I spent 10 years in local government, 8 as an elected mayor for the city of Coachella, and it is there where we were able to work closely with the state and other stakeholders to improve the quality of our park systems. For me, it was very basic. I grew up in that city. I played Little League Baseball, football, soccer, and every time we traveled outside the area, it was a question of why are the parks in other parts of the communities a lot nicer than they are in our community. And so we made it a point to develop a master plan and begin the necessary investments in that small community. So with that, I'm looking forward to the input that we will get here today. We have some significant hurdles to overcome as it relates to getting this bond to the governor's desk, the first one being Senate appropriations. And so I hope that we can, from today's discussion, be able to get a collective and cohesive message to send to our Senate colleagues on how important this is, not only to you, but to the entire state of California. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Garcia. Our first witness to testify, really to welcome us to the Community Center, is Carlene McCart, the Director of Community Services for the City of San Rafael. Please join us. And one of the things that Mr. Garcia mentioned was his service on his local city council, and I began as a local elected as well here in San Rafael. As I welcome you this morning to the Albert J. Borough Community Center. This community center here at Pickleweed Park was really a vision of local officials and Mayor Borough, who served on our council for 24 years and on the Planning Commission for 16 years before that. He gave so much of his time to our city and prioritized parks and serving everyone in our city. And this building is really, I don't mean to steal your thunder, Carlene, but this building is really a testament to his commitment to that, and I think for the two of us, having come from a local council and then see the role that we have in really empowering locals, and Mr. Garcia's bill certainly has funding for that in there, is a great lesson for us to bring with us once we get to the Capitol. Carlene, please.
So welcome to Albert J. Borough Community Center. This is the central address for the Canal neighborhood, which is one of 8 neighborhoods in San Rafael. It's the only community recreation facility for about 12,000 people living within just about a 1 square mile radius. And it was named for our former mayor. And I'll just add to your remarks that he was a champion for this project to expand and renovate this particular community center. And one of the pivotal moments was when he attended a hearing for the State Library Bond Act. There was a little bit of money left after distribution, and they invited those who had not been granted to come into a hearing and basically make a case for why their project deserved to be part of the last $3 million worth of distribution. And our mayor, who at the time was, I think, in his 70s, stood for 3 hours in line to testify. And we were able to get the $1 million we needed to put the library component into this building, and that actually topped our funding. So we're here today because of his efforts and also because of State Bond Act, in that case for the library. This is a unique operational model. It's not a pay-for-play recreation center. It's a recreation center that's programmed by the community through an advisory board that reviews proposals for use. And they are in authority to waive or reduce fees for use of our building. So we see a lot of providers and a lot of different types of programming, education, recreation, technology, social, cultural types of things happen here. And we do it with only three full-time staff members. The rest are folks who come in from other service agencies or other programs to direct those activities. So we've relied on State Park Bond Act money under Prop 12, under Prop 14, and Prop 84 in San Rafael to make impactful differences in our park system, which includes 19 parks and hundreds of acres of open space. We're a built-out city. We don't have development impact fees to help support park and recreation facility development, and because we're based on sales tax for a majority of our city budget, there's very little capacity to move $1 million projects in this area. So we are very grateful, and we are very reliant on partners such as the state to help us put together projects. And I just wanted to highlight for you, which may be common to most of us in the field, what State Park Bond Act funds actually do for San Rafael. Number one, they help us move our deferred renovation list into the area of possibility. They attract other funders. We had 14 funders that were part of this project, and certainly having state money attached to it was attractive to the philanthropic funding and private funding sectors. And they allow us or the State Park Bond Act funds have allowed us to partner with others as well. In fact, the County of Marin and the City of San Rafael put some of their Prop 12 money together, and we built a $2 million skate park kind of to the north of town that serves not only San Rafael, but the greater Marin County area. Our next project, and we're going to sharpen our pencils, we've got a beautiful field out here that is used extensively by the community as well as county-wide interest. It has 2 soccer fields and a baseball field on it, but we have to close it for about 5 to 6 months a year because the natural turf doesn't withstand the amount of use that it gets. This is the only active recreation site to serve those 12,000 folks in this neighborhood, and we desperately need to increase our capacity and our ability to serve year-round with a facility that promotes health and fitness, recreation, and cultural activities. We have about a $3 million price tag on the work that we want to do to convert to a synthetic field, and we are looking for partnerships in order to make that a reality. So I thank you for the opportunity. Welcome, and if there's any questions that you might have about the facility, I'll be around afterwards and happy to help you.
Our next panelist is Helen Kirstein from the Legislative Analyst's Office. Thank you so much for joining us. The LAO this week we recognized for 75 years of service to the legislature, providing nonpartisan advice and recommendations that are all non-binding, but also extraordinarily important for us as we balance the needs of the state, and as we look at what our stated desires are for policy, but what the actual outcomes of that policy might be. And for that, we're grateful for that service.
Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Helen Kirstein with the Legislative Analyst's Office. I really appreciate being invited out here this morning. It's so beautiful, and it's just such a pleasure to be speaking to all of you. Thank you so much. So we've been asked to provide some context on the state, on the Bond Act that's being proposed. And so we prepared a handout which should help guide our comments. So hopefully you folks have that. It's just going to go pretty quickly, but it provides some context on state bonds generally, past park bonds, and the new proposed bond. So as I said, I'm going to go pretty quickly in the interest of time because I know we have a number of speakers, but if you have questions, please do feel free to ask. So if you turn to page 1 of the handout, if you have it in front of you, we provide an overview of some key points related to bonds, just for some context. So one of the things I wanted to mention is that bonds are really a type of borrowing. The state typically uses them for larger projects that provide long-term benefits. Since infrastructure lasts for many, many years, this building hopefully will be here for many, many years to come. It's reasonable for future taxpayers to help contribute to those projects. And also it can be difficult sometimes for the state to pay for really major projects all at once. So there are a lot of reasons we do bonds. So the state typically repays bonds over time, and that's called debt service. Debt service includes both the principal on the bonds as well as interest. Usually the state repays about $2 for every dollar it borrows, but when you adjust that for inflation, it's about $1.30. It's also important to note that those repayments typically come from the general fund, and that's the state's main operating account. So it's used to pay for all sorts of state services, from education to healthcare to you name it. We pay for all sorts of things from the general fund. It's also important to note that debt service is a relatively large share of the general fund expenses in the resources area. So about 1/3 of the general fund dollars that go towards resources are spent to repay debt service on past resources bonds. So if you turn to page 2, we have a few considerations when you're designing and crafting a bond. One of the first ones is just deciding who to give the money to. And so this came up a little bit, I think, in the previous comments, but it's important for the state to think about, given its priorities, how much funding to provide for state needs and state parks versus regional needs and local needs. It's also important to think about how to distribute those funds, whether to state departments or whether through a per capita basis, or competitive grants can be also used very successfully. It's also important to think about the criteria that will be created to help select the best projects and the projects that meet the state's goals. One of the things, once again, that we think about is often trying to make sure that that includes projects that are those long-term projects. And then a few other considerations. One of the things we think is really important is to make sure there is ongoing money for operations and maintenance. These buildings, you can build them, but you need to make sure that really they can be operated on a long-term basis. And then also to maximize the amount of funding that goes towards those projects themselves. We think it's really important to try to minimize the amount of funding, for example, that goes towards administrative or other types of expenses. And then, of course, it's key to make sure that there's accountability and oversight for these bond funds. I mean, the public certainly expects and deserves to know what they're funding with their dollars. So that's always a critical component of crafting a bond. So if you turn to page 3, we have a brief summary of some recent bonds that relate to the parks area. So you'll note that since 2000, there were 3 bonds that provided some funding towards parks: Proposition 12, Proposition 40, and Proposition 84. And in total, they allocated about $3.5 billion for parks. About 2/3 of that went to local assistance, so went to local projects. You'll note that the vast majority of that funding has been appropriated. There's only about $45 million that hasn't been appropriated by the legislature. And certainly the majority of it has also been committed to projects. So there's a relatively small amount of money that's available within the existing parks bonds. And if you turn to page 4, we provide a summary of the proposed parks bond, AB 2244 Garcia. And I do want to note that since we prepared this earlier this week, there was an amendment to the bill, and so there was some intent language that was added to note that there's intent to increase some of these funding amounts. But I think this still provides basically a framework for some of the areas that there's an interest in funding. So I'll just very briefly touch on a few of the main categories of funding in the Bond Act. The first is the creation and expansion of safe neighborhood parks. And there's about $1 billion that's provided for competitive grants for communities with relatively few parks. There's also about $1 billion for state and local park rehabilitation, trails, and rural recreation. And much of this funding is for per capita grants for local parks and for their rehabilitation, as well as for state park rehabilitation and state park needs related to deferred maintenance and other types of things. And then there's also a good chunk of funding that's provided for water and land conservation, climate preparedness, and habitat resilience. And some of the major categories in this area include funding for the Wildlife Conservation Board, funding for various state conservancies, and competitive grants for trails and waterfront greenways. So that's the end of my prepared remarks, but if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
You had mentioned the importance of accountability measures, which I completely agree with, and we have some built into this. Is accountability for a bond for parks any different than accountability for bonds for other purposes in the state of California?
I think it's pretty similar. Basically, you want to make sure that you know where the dollars are going and that those are tracked and that you know that there's actually an outcome. You know what the outcomes are from whatever those dollars are. So that while the outcome measures might be different for a parks project than for a housing project or a school project, I think the general concepts that you want to think about in terms of just making sure that folks know where their dollars are going and what they're getting for them, I think those are consistent across a variety of types of bonds.
And have we figured out how to get accountability right, or will we always be working towards getting accountability right to make sure that public dollars go where they're intended?
I think it's an ongoing effort. Certainly the state has made, I think, quite a few strides in this area. There were some improvements that were made with these 2006 bonds. There was a series of bonds in 2006, and there was a bond accountability website that was added, and quite a bit of information that was published as part of that. That was certainly a step forward. With Proposition 1, the legislature made huge efforts to try to include quite a bit of accountability in that bond. I think that was a significant priority for a lot of folks. And so there were even more steps made about really defining what kinds of metrics of success would be established and really making sure that those were meaningful. So I think it remains to be seen. There's probably still room for improvement like there always is, but I think the state has really prioritized that and made significant efforts.
Thank you very much. We have Cedric Mitchell from the Department of Parks and Recreation, Max Corton, the Director of Marin County Parks, and Robert Doyle, the Chair of the State Park Partners Coalition.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll speak quickly on the bonds that have been under our jurisdiction, starting with Propositions 12 and 40 and Prop 84. To note, Propositions 12 and 40 were different from Prop 84 in that Props 12 and 40 had multiple programs that existed within them that included block grants as well as specified grants and competitive grants. Proposition 84, which was the most recent that we administer, had two programs, the statewide park program and the nature education program, which were both competitive programs. We currently, I'll speak to Prop 84, in particular, that grant, we had approximately $368 million under the statewide park program. We had over 900 applications that came in for that particular program, totaling about $3.1 billion. So we were basically at about a 9-10 to 1 ratio of what we could fund. The nature education program was equally competitive. We had about $93 million to give out. We had about $1 billion in requests for that program also. Each of the programs were highly competitive. Our process is very inclusive. We spend a great deal of time going to communities and providing technical assistance workshops and engaging with the public in also in the design of our guidelines. As a result of Prop 84, in particular, that you might be interested in, and I'm going to save a lot of time for questions, but I've given you a couple of things. One is a summary of each of the propositions and how we administered and where those dollars went. But I also want to draw your attention to our statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which there are tools that are within that statewide recreation plan on website that allow for communities to look at their communities more intensely. So things such as within a half-mile radius, you can tell the median household income. You'll be able to tell how many parks are located within the half mile of any community in California. As a result, you can also look at who lives near parks and who does not, the ratio of where those people live, and the amounts of park acreage that is available to them. In addition, on the website is our illustration of all of the grants that we gave under the Bond Act and Land and Water Conservation Fund. And there are also success stories that are on the website that help anyone who has access to the program to really look at their community and do an evaluation. Although our department has been managing grants since 1964, since 2000, we have managed over 8,400 grants. We've given that represent over 34 different programs. We have 12,000, almost 13,000 projects that have arisen since the Prop 12, 40, and 84 projects have come forward. The other thing that has evolved, we spend a great deal of time encouraging our applicants to engage with communities and design of projects. So if you look at the evolution of Props 12 through 84, you'll see a great deal of partnerships being developed both with the public and with institutions, both private and public.
Our department is one of 23 public land managers that are charged with caring for public lands and providing recreation opportunities in Marin to residents of the San Francisco Bay Area. AB 2444 establishes a strong framework to infuse needed financial resources to neighborhood, regional, state, and open space preserves and other natural areas. There's a significant need in Marin County, as in other counties in California. Marin County Parks has identified roughly $280 million in capital needs related to our parks and open space preserves. From the limited data that we've gathered, we estimate the 19 local cities, towns, and districts in Marin have approximately $95 million in capital improvements related to the parks they manage as well. A number of important projects in Marin County parks have come out of the need to adapt to sea level rise and climate change. The Bolinas Lagoon, McGinnis Marsh, Bothene Marsh, and the Mill Valley Sausalito Bike Path are examples of Marin County Parks units where both critical endangered species habitat and important recreation resources are threatened by sea level rise. Innovative solutions to adapt to both natural systems and community infrastructure are planned and being designed for these special places. AB 2444 is the investment that's needed to make these projects a reality and ensure that both the biologic diversity and the critical infrastructure we have are able to adapt to this changing world. Marin County is one of the healthiest counties in the nation, but it's also home to great disparities in health outcomes. Low-income minority communities in Marin County have lower life expectancies and are less likely to visit and engage in healthy activities in parks. In Marin County, in Marin City, Marin County Parks has partnered with the local community service district to improve and maintain a new park facility. The updated facility and a park prescription program that partners with healthcare providers with park programming has not only increased park visitation in this underserved community, it has also led to improved health outcomes. The majority of Marin County parks were constructed in the 1970s and 80s, and we've found that as we update these parks and replace aging infrastructure, we have the opportunity to make our parks more appealing to a diverse community of potential visitors. With AB 2444, we have an opportunity to invest in a park system that engages the entire community in healthy recreation and reduces health disparities. In closing, AB 2444 provides critical health and community benefits and, importantly, a tremendous return on investment for California, as the outdoor industry represents an $87 billion economic driver in the state. And matching funds are increasingly available, including here in Marin County, tax measures like our local Measure A sales tax measure. Again, we respectfully request your support of AB 2444. Thank you.
Robert Doyle, General Manager of the East Bay Regional Park District and co-chair of State Park Partners. State Park Partners is an organization of about 30 agencies statewide, from San Diego all the way up north, that operate state parks on behalf of the state park system at no cost to the state park system. The East Bay Regional Park District operates 65 parks in the East Bay. We operate 3 state parks. We spend $5 million of local taxpayers' money a year operating those parks with no operating assistance from state. So it's a huge savings to the state. Local and regional parks, according to a recent study by San Francisco State University, have seen an increase of over 17% in usership. Our own surveys show in the East Bay we're now up to 22 million people a year using our parks, just in 2 counties of California. The local and regional parks, like nonprofits, stepped up during the recession to keep parks open when parks were threatened to be closed. But we've had no help to do that. As a very specific example, and I think those are important, Del Valle State Recreation Area, built in the 1960s by the state of California, is a state park that serves on a holiday 10,000 people come to that park. It's a big recreation area. It's 1/5 of the state park water recreation in state reservoirs in the state. So it's a big park and a big high use. The water system in that park, built in the 1960s, is breaking all the time. The entire infrastructure of that plumbing is falling apart. We treat 250,000 gallons of water on a weekend in the park for the major campground, 150 sites, and for large uses of that reservoir, picnic sites, etc. We spent $500,000 last year just on a fix of a broken part of that water system. We now look at a $4 million infrastructure fix for just the water system at that state park. Another example is the shower systems for the campground that were built in the 1960s. One large shower facility is beyond its use. The estimate to rebuild that is $700,000 for one large campground shower facility. The infrastructure costs are killing your partners who are trying to keep state parks open for the state of California, and I think that's really, really something that has to be addressed. If you look with our other partners across the state, basically those facilities are so old. The history of state parks, mainly built by the WPA in the 1930s and 40s, and then in the 60s with a really big investment in state parks. And that investment is now really old. So roads, bridges, trails, historic buildings of California are examples of things falling apart. I think everybody knows in this room, and I know that assembly members would know, that if you have a hole in the roof and you fix it, it costs money. If you don't fix that hole, the whole building goes and falls apart. And that's really the story of state parks right now. We really need a reinvestment in the old and aging infrastructure of heavily used parks in urban areas and in park areas. We have 31 miles of San Francisco Bay shoreline, including a 9-mile state park, East Shore State Park. The shoreline, because of sea level rise and increased storms, is eroding like around the rest of the bay. We just did a $3 million fix of a rock riprap area on a very short section of that park. The costs are really amazing. So I think what's really important to look at is, while there has been a great accomplishment in conservation and buying lands, and the state should be, and the state park should be complimented for that, the reinvestment in older parks hasn't happened. The cost has increased, and it's really, really something. A recent study by National Parks this year says for every dollar spent in a national park, $10 is returned to the economy and investment. So the facts are there. The economic investment, even with the cost of paying back bonds, that investment far exceeds the benefit of not having to repair things when they're, instead of $1.2 billion in repairs and infrastructure, you now have $2.5 billion of infrastructure repair. So even though the cost of bonds is significant, it's a one-time fix that you don't have to keep doing if you repair the buildings and keep them up in order. Otherwise, you're repairing the whole building again. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. Park funding delivers a huge benefit to your citizens. They improve the health, the happiness of our families. They benefit our economy, tourism. They protect our rivers and watersheds and our coastlines. And it's far past due to make an investment in your state park system and in local parks as well. And I really appreciate the opportunity to encourage that. And I hope everyone here, including our assembly members, really fights to get this bond moving and get it on the ballot as soon as possible, because it's urgent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of the panelists, and that's exactly what the two of us have been doing all year to try to get these things addressed. You've voiced so many unmet needs that we have not invested in over time that really are costing our communities a great deal, but also end up not providing our residents with the services they deserve and the access to parks that all Californians should have. And when we talk about all Californians, it gets lost. These are our neighbors that we're talking about, not just some abstract Californians somewhere in the state. They're people that live in our own communities that aren't getting that access. I did want to ask a specific question for Mr. Mitchell about Prop 84, about those unmet needs and the potential for what I saw as not oversubscription, but much more demand and need for Prop 84 than Prop 84 is actually able to deliver for. And is there any insight onto that you or even the local parks staff could say from their community's perspective? I'd be glad to hear a little bit about that.
Certainly. As I mentioned, with Prop 84, we were oversubscribed by about 10 to 1. We had approximately 900 applications asking for $3.1 billion. We were able to fund $368 million out of that particular fund. The projects ranged from community fields to new parks to rehabilitation of existing parks, expansion of parks, et cetera. So there's a wide gamut of need that was represented by that particular program.
William Penn Mott Jr. ran state parks, ran national parks, said that getting park projects funded is like squeezing water out of rocks. And there's nobody better than squeezing water out of rocks in the park and recreation industry. We know how to leverage funds. We know how to raise funds locally. But it is this type of grant funding that is so critical to get the ball rolling, to get other funds approved. Local agencies around the Bay Area specifically have repeatedly passed 2/3 votes to fund local parks. We're doing our self-help. We need help from the state with these type of grant sources to really spread that money and leverage the state funds in that investment.
We have Philip Sales, the Executive Director of the Napa Valley Vine Trail Coalition. We have Steve Deering, the Vice Chair of Friends of China Camp. Elizabeth Goldstein, President of the California State Parks Foundation. Marilee Eckert, CEO, Conservation Corps North Bay. Jay Ziegler, Director of Policy and External Affairs for the Nature Conservancy. Alejandra Chiesa, Bay Area Program Director, the Trust for Public Lands. Allison Hermance, Director of Communications, WildCare. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. We'll begin with Mr. Sales.
First of all, I want to echo what Bob Doyle just said. Thank you both for your leadership on this. As a representative of a nonprofit group that's building a 47-mile bike trail and hiking trail that will connect Vallejo with Calistoga, we're thrilled that the Park Bond is setting aside money for the trails programs, and I echo probably what our colleagues at the Bay Trail and the San Francisco Bay Area Ridge Trail. Our organization is has a challenge to build a 47-mile hiking and biking path, the cost of which is about $50 million, and we're raising $20 million of that philanthropically from individuals and organizations. And in many ways, it's a sort of echo of what happened during the state crisis a few years ago, where nonprofits stepped into the breach to keep the state parks open. And I think there's some great lessons that we all learned during that. I, at the time, was president of the State Parks Association for Sonoma and Petaluma, and participated in keeping one of the state parks open. We have opportunities here with this bond measure to provide funding not only to deliver the new projects, but also to do a lot of work in keeping our existing park system open and doing the maintenance and necessary repairs and restoration that is so necessary to leave this as a legacy. Trail projects, in many ways, are a great opportunity to do some social investing, and that's why our organization has attracted funds from the philanthropic sector, because we're connecting communities, and that's a huge part of what we're trying to do with the parks business. We've been in this for many, many years, but connecting communities, right, going all the way back to Frederick Law Olmsted and his plans for California parks. These are important things. It's also a way to address health needs within communities. Parks have always been a place where you could take your kids, but they also, with trails, where you can connect communities, and you can give people an opportunity to have free cost of recreation. People get out. We have a huge diabetes problem, both with adults and children in the Bay Area, despite the fact that we're considered sort of a wealthy part of the state. But it's a need that has to be met, and providing inexpensive, low-cost or no-cost facilities where people can get recreation is very important. And also, we're addressing some of the needs of communities as alternatives for transportation. For instance, the Vine Trail project, of which I'm the executive director, we have 18,000 students attending facilities within a half a mile of the Vine Trail. And so when we complete it, it's an alternative for people not only to get out and recreate, not only for the tourists, but also for a way for kids to get to school, and their parents don't have to drive them. So there are a lot of opportunities here in this bond which will help us get our project completed. And finally, I'd just like to say something which has been on my mind for quite a while. When I was involved with keeping the state park open in Petaluma, some of the things that we're doing as nonprofits, we have to go out and we have to solicit private money. And a lot of people are interested in giving money as a social investment, but we also need to be very cognizant of the fact that we need to be looking at project delivery. And I think agencies that work together, we have a number of state agencies that often seem to be almost at loggerheads with each other. And as nonprofits stepping in, we're learning a lot about that. And we would really encourage the agencies to work collaboratively together, because when we work together, we can accomplish a lot. Thank you very much.
My name is Steve Deering. I am on the board of directors of China Camp State Park. I think many of you are familiar with China Camp State Park. You can almost see it from here, out there on San Pablo Bay. It's a 1,500-acre park with miles of beautiful trails, a great beach, and what we think is most important at that park is the restored Chinese fishing village from the 1870s. So if you haven't come out to the park, please do come out and see it. It's a special place, and we hope you'll join us out there. In 2011, we heard that some 70 state parks were going to be closed because of state budget cuts. And much to our dismay, Friends of China Camp was on that list. But working very closely with our partners at state parks, we were able to enter into an agreement to operate the park as partners with the state. So we have had our first operating agreement in 2012, and we are entering a new agreement now. And this has been an extremely successful partnership, due in great measure to the tremendous support that we've gotten from our colleagues at state parks. And through their help and strong community support, we are now fulfilling our mission of keeping China Camp thriving and open to all. I suppose we're a little bit biased, but we really think the notion of these state nonprofit collaborations is one that works very well already in some parks and has tremendous potential for the future, and this is certainly something that the Parks Forward Commission is looking at. Moving to AB 2444, something that we very strongly support. Let's talk about, if we could, just very briefly about deferred maintenance. We show, or there's a number that's going around, that there's $1.3 billion in deferred maintenance in state parks all over the state. At China Camp, we're able to put that number in context. We have 15 miles of multi-use trails. They were built in the early 1980s, and over time they have become severely eroded, rutted, damaged, and they are causing both environmental damage, which could be permanent, and they are a danger to our hikers, bikers, runners, and equestrians. It's a problem that needs to be fixed now. What we have been able to do, working with the California Conservation Corps and with thousands of volunteer hours, many of them through California State Park Foundation's Park Champions program, thank you, Elizabeth, we have been able to rebuild 2 miles of trails and repair 2 more in about a 16-month period. So we have a sense of what the need is in 278 parks, how great this need is, what a gargantuan task it is to tackle this huge backlog. But we are also very much aware of the fact that if this is not addressed now, the parks will not be around for future generations to use. We think it's absolutely essential to get a handle on the deferred maintenance now, and we see AB 2444 as a large help in that regard. I would also, you talk about parks and all the deferred maintenance, and sometimes the question comes up, well, should we even be considering adding new parks at this point? And I think our response, in kind of a broad context, is yes, we should. We should acknowledge the fact that the demographics in California are changing, and that if parks are going to survive in the future, we need to make parks relevant for all of our citizens. And so we think this means things like possibly some more urban parks, parks with more recreational facilities like the soccer fields they have here, sites for multi-generational family reunions and other kinds of celebrations. So we think there is a real need to not just deal with the deferred maintenance, but also to make new parks and make them relevant to our new populations. Speaking specifically about China Camp, I'll do this very quickly. Speaking about China Camp, we also see ways of making improvements there. For example, we do have a campground, and the notion of adding a few basic cabin structures we think is a really good idea. There are a lot of people who are not traditional campers, who don't have thousands of dollars worth of tents and camping gear, but who want to try camping, and we think this would encourage non-traditional users to come out and use the park, and that's clearly a great goal. Also, transportation is an issue. We need to get creative about getting people from urban centers out to where the traditional parks are. And finally, here in Marin County, we have county parks, state parks, city parks, and actually federal parks at Point Reyes. And there needs to be a way to build bridges among those parks. So, for example, someone at the great swimming facilities at McNears Beach can walk right next door to China Camp and see the cultural history and the natural history that's out there. There has to be a way of working together to make all of our parks more accessible. So thank you very much. We see lots of creative ways of making parks open and accessible to all, and we strongly support the legislation.
My name is Elizabeth Goldstein. I am the president of the California State Parks Foundation, and I very much appreciate this opportunity. I'm here to speak in support of AB 2444, which proposes the California Parks, Water, Climate, and Coastal Protection and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2016. Thank you for all those words. It certainly gives it punch, a bond for the November 2016 ballot. It is indeed time to reinvest in California's natural and historic infrastructure. When we and many partners, some of whom are here with me at this table, banded together to put the last significant parks bond on the ballot, Prop 84, in 2006, none of us would have guessed how many years would elapse before we would be able to seriously consider the next bond. However, here we are a decade later, gathering to discuss the now critically needed bond for California's wonderful overlapping and reinforcing park systems. The strength of both Prop 84 and AB 2444 is that they support all manner of protected open spaces in California. California is indeed greater for this interlocking system of protected places. This bond is important because it proposes to focus on fulfilling the needs of the numerous communities that are still vastly underserved for parks. Quality parks at all levels increase the quality of life for California residents and create health benefits for all of us. They ensure engaging programming, access to safe areas for play and exploration, preservation of protected lands, and places of respite. And that is consistent with California's desire to access the outdoors and use parks as part of their daily lives. Within the narrower state parks realm, the bond commits $350 million to undoing the ravages of deferred maintenance and focusing on game-changing visitor service facilities, both reinforcing the strengths that the state park system already encompasses and looking forward to where it needs to go. In addition, we strongly support the $20 million proposed investment in our state parks revenue generation program. And let me be very clear, CSPF does not believe that enterprise projects will resolve long-standing financial needs of the state park system, but it could and should bring innovation and actionable projects to the public in important new ways. This is another step in the modest exploration of new tools for our state parks. Bonds encourage action, can, if structured correctly, spur innovation, and in this case, increase the relevancy of existing new park resources for Californians. This bond, if placed on the ballot, passed by the legislature first, signed by the governor, will not have to do it alone. It will be leveraged by timely bond initiatives in such places as Sonoma, San Francisco, and San Diego. It will be reinforced by key measures to support maintenance and operations at California state parks and local initiatives in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and other locations throughout the state. This bond is part of the state's responsibility to this array of mechanisms that have the potential to revitalize parks from local to regional to state systems. Parks nationwide are suffering from a crisis. They are no longer at the center of family recreational choices and, frankly, their thoughts. California is no exception to that rule. However, as everyone in this room knows, parks have and can play a vital role in health, education, and respite. The investment this bond represents can play a critical role in whether park systems here in this great state pivot successfully back to their full potential of providing vital services to all Californian residents. At CSPF, we believe this bond is positioned to do that. We offer you and your colleagues our heartfelt support in bringing the potential of this more relevant, exciting, and innovative system of parks to California. Thank you very much for your leadership on this matter.
Conservation Corps North Bay, which serves Marin and Sonoma counties, is one of the 13 certified local conservation corps throughout California. Certified local conservation corps are individual, regional, nonprofit organizations. We are not part of the California Conservation Corps, or the CCC, which is a government agency within the California Natural Resources Agency. However, local corps and the CCC work collaboratively in many areas and share the same mission of taking care of the environment while providing job, training, and academic instruction for California's youth. Most of the youth in our core programs come to us with major barriers to employment. Most dropped out of high school, may have a history of gang involvement or substance abuse, or weren't able to complete their education or get job skills because of other personal circumstances like family illness or becoming a teen parent. Often coming to the Corps is the only hope of getting back on track because it is a place where they can go to school and get paid training all in one location. Conservation corps were written into previous park and water bonds, including Prop 12, Prop 40, and Prop 84. Corps have successfully used these dollars to engage our Corps members in projects to improve our recreational areas and communities. We work with all the public land managers on priority projects. A few examples of projects that CCNB completed, thanks to previous bonds, are the Lower Redwood Creek project, where we restored habitat, removed invasive plants from wetland habitat, hand-graded the dune face, and connected an accessible trail to the beach. At the Mount Tam Meadow enhancement, we removed encroaching Douglas firs on 65 acres to protect the wildlife and plants. The Healdsburg Ridge Open Space Preserve, we decommissioned and reestablished abandoned roads and poorly designed trails to reduce erosion and sediment from going into the Russian River. At Pollen Creek, on land managed by Sonoma County Ag and Open Space, we rehabilitated the site of a homeless encampment, removed non-native vegetation, scarified compacted soils, broke up fire rings, and restored exposed sites. These were not make-work projects. These are all labor-intensive projects that require technical hand and power tools expertise, and they make significant improvements in our natural environment. This is a double win. Our communities are cared for, and our youth get on a positive employment and educational path. On behalf of the Corps across California, I would like to thank Assembly members Levine and Garcia for your fantastic environmental leadership, at the same time as genuinely taking measures to help those most in need in our communities. We are living in a time of uncertainty. Between the climate crisis and the violence and expressions of hatred that we are bombarded with through the media on a daily basis, many people are unsettled. I see it showing up in the behaviors of the youth I am surrounded with, both in my professional and personal life. We need leaders like yourselves that take positive actions to improve our communities and that show real compassion and caring. Leaders who are willing to invest in our future. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, Assemblymember Garcia, thank you for your leadership on these issues. It is really an honor to join partners and supporters around the room today in the cause that you're really bringing attention to. And we thank you for that. We need to do more of this and pull our voices together. Your leadership in Assembly Bill 2444 is critically important. On behalf of the Nature Conservancy and its 100,000 members in the state, we greatly appreciate it and will join you every step of the way in this effort. Our priorities in working with our partners are to support the advanced recreation and conservation throughout California, to prepare our coasts to be more climate resilient, to help green our cities, to make them great places for all of us to live. And to also to recognize working landscapes and the importance of upper watersheds, forest health, and clean water that all of us share together. The Nature Conservancy is very pleased to have worked with many throughout this room in advancing Propositions 12 and 13, 40 and 50, Proposition 84, and some of those investments date back 16 years, and now we are running on fumes. So just a few years out of our parks closure crisis, we need to confront another reality, which is that we are running out of investment essential to fuel state and local partnerships, essential to fuel resource restoration, essential to build the kinds of opportunities that the CCC creates around us, and this is truly a statewide issue. Our needs are in conservation and parks are as diverse as California, from the challenges at the Salton Sea to the Klamath River, restoration of our coastal rivers, including the great work of the CCC on the Russian River, are really examples of how integrated, diverse, and challenging it is to protect the natural resources, the way of life, and this great place that we all call home in California. I think what I would like to leave you with today is that as we look around the corner and this portfolio of historic investments that Californians have strongly supported over time, they are virtually gone. We're down to 1% funding in many of these categories. Proposition 84 was recently reprogrammed. Most of that, the remaining funding in Proposition 84 is really dedicated to integrated water management programs. And so we're running on fumes and facing a crisis in really setting an example of how California can lead the country in resource restoration, resource protection, parks creation, and preparation for greater resilience to the challenges of climate change. And I think today we want to acknowledge your leadership and the importance of this challenge in moving forward to ensure that we have more reliable funding for our parks, for our great places, for the natural resources that make California such an important place for all of us. So thank you for the dialogue that we're having today. We hope that Assembly Bill 2044 can emerge in this last month of the session. I think it would encourage everyone in the room to be as active as possible in reaching out to everyone you know around the state to encourage the legislature to move forward. We have to do this, and we greatly appreciate your efforts, and we join you in this great cause. Thank you.
My name is Alejandra Chiesa. I'm the Bay Area Program Director with the Trust for Public Land. The Trust for Public Land works with communities across the country to create parks and conserve land for people. And we could not do this without the support of the legislature like you, so we thank you for your leadership. I'm here in support of AB 2444, and I'm going to give my testimony from the point of view of someone that is on the ground implementing projects and seeing the impact that this transformational projects make, and also the need for more funding. I'm going to use actually two projects that are right here in our backyard. One is Rocky Graham in Marin City. and the other one, Canal Community Gardens, a few blocks from here that we work with the city of San Rafael with Carlene McCart, who's here. And I'm going to use these projects to tell you how parks provide multiple benefits to the communities and are critical to the infrastructure for livable communities. So Rocky Grant Park in Marin City, it's reopened a year ago, and it's been an amazing transformation. Marin City has 3,500 residents and a deep history dating from World War II, when a lot of African-American laborers moved to help build Liberty ships in the South Salito waterfront. And this community did not have a park, a city park. There used to be a park built in 1940s, and it fell in disrepair. And for 20 years, they didn't have that park where the community could gather and meet and have programs. With the help of Prop 84, that changed. And the resident rally, we work with Marin City Community Services District, Marin Grassroots, and Marin City Community to redesign and rebuild the park. The park provides multiple benefits. Health, a local clinic began writing park prescriptions for residents to use the park as part of their health routine. Training and jobs. There was an apprenticeship program and job training that provided residents with jobs during the construction of the park, and some actually were able to work in other projects. Community cohesion and happiness, that's very hard to measure, but this is where now all the generations meet. They have birthday parties, community gatherings, programs. It's basically function as the heart of the community, and that wouldn't have been possible with Prop 84. Another example of a park and the benefits is Canal Community Gardens near here, which is providing, again, a place for community to gather, to grow healthy food, learn about gardening. So there's a component about health and food. And last but not least, obviously, parks are part of the green infrastructure that provide resilience against, in the face of climate change, by capturing stormwater, carbon, and providing habitat. So there are many more stories I could tell you about projects that have been built with this funding. And I also want to say that there's still a very urgent need for doing more. So thank you for having us, providing testimony, and we look forward to working with all of you to help pass this bond. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Allison Hermans. I'm the Director of Communications at WildCare. And WildCare is an organization based right here in San Rafael. We are a nature education center and also a wildlife hospital. We treat nearly 4,000 wild animal patients in our wildlife hospital every year, and I can actually introduce you to one of them. That's our little orphan baby squirrel over there. His nest was cut out of a tree. He landed on his head. He ended up being orphaned, and our volunteers at WildCare took care of him, and he was actually released back to the wild, which is very cool. But chance to introduce that little guy. So we treat about 4,000 animals every year in the Wildlife Hospital at WildCare, and we reach about 55,000 children and adults throughout the Bay Area with our experiential hands-on nature education programs. And our organization and the people we serve are exactly the people that will directly benefit from AB 2444. And we really want to thank you, Chairman Levine and Assemblymember Garcia, for the opportunity and for your leadership on this issue, and of course the opportunity to show our support for it. The nature education programs that WildCare provides really rely on access to parks and open space and the opportunity to get kids, adults, our friends, our families, our communities out into nature. Our programs do have extensive scholarship opportunities, and that really gives WildCare the chance to get underserved communities, underprivileged kids out into nature. And so obviously without healthy parks, without healthy open space, without a healthy environment, we cannot offer those programs, we cannot offer those opportunities. So this is very, very important to us. Specifically, our Wild Care Family Adventures programs, our Aventuras Familiares program that allows, it's a free program, bilingual, that gets kids specifically into parks, including China Camp. It's really, really a program that strongly needs healthy parks in order to be able to run. One of our founders, Elizabeth Terwilliger, used to always say, if you teach children to love nature, people will take, you want to teach children to love nature because people take care of what they love. And we really believe in that very strongly. Another reason that Wild Care is here to support this bill is actually one that's different from everyone on this panel. It's actually Article 8, Section 4 of the bill, and it is an opportunity presented for wildlife organizations, professional wildlife centers like ours that provide life-saving care for injured and orphaned wild animals to apply for $10 million in competitive grants to further our programs, to increase the animals, the opportunities that we have to help and heal wild animals. And this is the first time that a bill in state government has significantly really acknowledged the value and importance of the work that organizations like Wild Care do to help the community and help animals specifically directly with that actual medical intervention. We're very, very excited about that acknowledgement. We're very, very excited about the opportunity for organizations like ours to have that support. AB 2444 is an excellent opportunity to fund some very, very important things within California. Wild Care is very excited to support it, and thank you so much.
As a Marin resident and as a former San Rafael City Council member, the funding for parks really came to light because of the Friends of China Camp. I still remember the first time I met with Steve Deering and bringing to my attention how we needed to find a way to keep this amazing asset open to the public to learn, but also to rejuvenate and be with nature is incredibly powerful for residents that have access to parks, and everyone in California should have that access. To be able to hear from the Conservation Corps and share their story with all of you, and as I was sharing with Assemblymember Garcia about the work that they do is backbreaking hard work that actually protects not just the natural environment, but also our built environment when our natural environment does not get the attention that it needs. And I saw some very young women and men clearing brush from a creek before the rainy season, before El Nino came. My time is up. And that if they didn't do this work, Highway 101 would end up flooded. And these young people were doing this work, and they were grateful for the opportunity to have this work. And it provided direction in their life, practical training in their life, and also helped the entire community because of that service. And that story needs to be told more. Ms. Chiesa, thank you for talking about the community garden here just a few blocks away. And I was at the groundbreaking when I was a council member for that, and the pent-up demand for more access, for having local gardens so people can have healthy food and local food. And the story that tells about the desire here in this neighborhood for that is powerful, and about the change that we can have in our communities about access to healthy foods and an appreciation that when you plant something and something grows, that's where food comes from, not from the store. And particularly in some food desert areas throughout California, that people can actually grow that healthy food. And for Ms. Hermance, about Wild Care, my children attended Parkside Children's Center. As children, the city of San Rafael is the largest child care provider in the city, maybe the county, that we could go and walk over to Wild Care. And I know you're going to go to a better place soon. We raise the money and make that happen, but that everyone in the community can walk into Wild Care and can learn about the challenges that wildlife has with the fact that we are building upon their habitat here in Marin. And of course, I've made wildlife corridors a priority for me in the legislature, crafting legislation to officially identify and designate wildlife corridors throughout California. is something that we can do more to protect wildlife and recognize their importance to the ecosystem, and certainly to help us protect our natural environment. So, but to all of you, I'm pointing out some of the local stuff, but to all of you that also do that work broadly across the state, of course, keeping Petaluma Adobe, we don't want to forget that open that Mr. Sales is involved in, but for all of you, Ms. Goldstein and Mr. Ziegler for keeping parks on the forefront, particularly as we have so many priorities confronting us in the legislature and of course in front of the governor that compete, that Mr. Garcia and I are trying to keep parks at the front. And so while we're trying to do that, and we get to hear your stories, and we can then bring that back to the 120 legislators who get to vote on whether or not this will be on the ballot, I'd be glad to hear from you about any local challenges you hear kind of outside of our day-to-day challenges in the legislature of making it a priority, if you have anything to share about that.
What I'm seeing is a real need to get young people outside and off of their electronics and out in nature, out in a place where they can experience the beauty around us and not just be, I mean, there's so much negativity that's going on in social media right now, and if that's what they're wrapped up in, I mean, I see it in nightmares from my children, I see it in acting out behaviors from the youth I work with. It's just like a huge problem that we're facing right now, and we need to make more opportunities to get youth out and get them off of their electronics and get them to just interact with each other and to have a good experience out in nature. I think it's critical. I think we're at a critical point where we have to do that, and that's what a bond like this would help us keep those areas in good shape and allow those opportunities.
My name is Rue Mapp, and I'm the founder and CEO of Outdoor Afro. Outdoor Afro is a national not-for-profit organization founded in Oakland, California. It is here where we have our base, and we are at the front lines of helping people have transformational outdoor activities in the company of their peers and peer leaderships all over California. I'm also a founding member of the Parks Now Coalition, which is a diverse group of stakeholders united in support of efforts to ensure every Californian can enjoy the health and recreational benefits that park and the outdoors provide. And as you heard, I am also a member of the California Park and Recreation Commission. I also have another hat of being on the board for the Outdoor Industry Association. And again, I would like to thank Senator Garcia for authoring AB 2444, which does a great job in advancing the goals of my organization and those of Parks Now. Studies show that Californians living in income-poor areas, particularly in urban areas, do not have their fair share of neighborhood parks that provide safe places to be healthy and experience nature. A recent UCLA study of Proposition 84, a recent conservation bond measure, concluded that to ensure our park and park poor areas get the parks they deserve, parks funding measures such as AB 2444 need to include clear and specified priorities for them. AB 2444 does this well by including nearly $1 billion for new parks and improvements to existing parks in park poor areas. These funds would be allocated in accordance with the guidelines of Senator Kevin De Leon's AB 31 program, which has been proven a very effective way to steer public funds to the communities most in need. This is the first statewide park bond measure that has allocated this much specifically to parks in park poor areas, which is so needed and begins to address what has been reported as a $4 billion need. AB 2444 also does a good job in addressing the recommendations of Governor Brown appointed Independent Parks Forward Commission, which has called for a full-scale modernization of our state parks with a focus on providing park access for all Californians. Funding under AB 2444 will enable the State Parks Department to improve facilities, build trails, preserve natural and cultural resources. As you know, and as we all experience, parks are so essential for our Californian way of life, the vibrancy of our communities, to the health of our families and children, and to our economy. AB 2444 in its current version sets forth a sound and equitable investment plan for parks. As it undergoes change, we must ensure that it maintains its focus on investing equitably in park assets for all our communities, including those that need them the most. I look forward to working with you all to make sure this happens. Thank you very much.
I'm Nona Dennis with Marine Conservation League, and I want to thank Assemblyman Mark and Eduardo for conducting this hearing. Very valuable for all of us, and we thoroughly support AB 2444. The Bond Act calls for many programs which will benefit the social welfare of all people and will unite communities and will provide health benefits. But there's a common thread that follows through all of these programs, and that is immersion in nature. Everyone wants to be immersed in nature. Our concern is that nature persists as the backdrop, as the foundation for all of these wonderful programs. Marine Conservation League, for its first 40 years of its 82-year existence, focused very much on acquisition of the special lands in Marin County that make up our national parks, our state parks, and many of our open space preserves. Our concern now is that we focus attention on preserving the very environment, the natural environment that has made all of these parks so popular to so many people. We want to ensure that unique ecosystems are protected and saved, that we protect corridors around the bay, and that we ensure that native plants will not be outsmarted, shall we say, out-persisted by invasive species. So while we support all of the programs that are going to benefit our social lives, our quality of life, and our health and so forth, we want to ensure that the foundation remains strong. The kinds of projects that Marilee Eckert talked about, preservation of meadows, restoration, and so forth, all of these receive an important emphasis in the bill. Thank you very much.
My name is Barbara Salzman. I'm with the Marin Audubon Society, and I too would like to express thanks for conducting this hearing, and especially to Assemblyman Levine for all he's done and is continuing to do for wildlife and habitat. And I will sort of echo Nona's comments, but clearly this bill will provide lots of benefits for people, for recreation, for outdoor experiences, but as Nona mentioned, without the nature and without the ecosystems, you're not going to have much to recreate in. and natural ecosystems have much more benefit than just going out, and they create opportunities for people to go out and work on habitats, recreate on trails, and enjoy nature. They provide the very clean air and water that we all need to survive and to have a healthy life. There certainly is a lot in the bill that will benefit people, but I think that it would be useful to have more emphasis or more clarification of the funding that will be able to be used to protect wildlife habitat, not only corridors, but habitat and the ecosystems that we all need. So there seems to be a restriction for WCB. They're going to get money, and the Coastal Conservancy will get money, and that's really useful. Is that it? Is there some other places where we can assure that all of these agencies and organizations will also be able to, and be required actually, to protect those resources? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Levine, Assemblyman Garcia, for this hearing. I've had a chance to work with Assemblyman Garcia down in his district. He's a fantastic advocate for his constituents and for all of us now. If you ever need a break from the heat, come on up. And Assemblyman Levine, thank you so much for your leadership. not only on this bill, but as you mentioned before, the wildlife corridor issue, which is featured in the bond. It's important that we talk to you, but I'm hoping that the messages that you hear today are heard in Sacramento, especially on the Senate side. The structure of the bill right now provides such an opportunity for all of us, and I know there's going to be some challenges in the next few weeks to hold it intact. So what I wanted to focus on, I work, if I didn't say, John McCall with the Sonoma Land Trust. A few things. When I'm speaking today for the Land Trust, I hope that it also echoes a lot of the organizations we work with in the Bay Area. Our job is to deliver votes to you for this bill. And so the priorities for the Bay Area are, there are multiple benefits. Obviously the park issue has been talked about a lot. I want to focus on a couple things. As a land trust, we go out and do acquisition deals to get land, a lot of land that goes into the park system, county park system, state park system. When the funding that we've counted on for decades now starts to dwindle, as Mr. Ziegler said, to this very small percentage, we go out and we buy land, and all of a sudden we're holding land that we thought we were going to be able to turn over to the park system, or land that's been in that would help build out parks is languishes. Private landowners who would love to do the right thing and sell land or sell an easement aren't able to do it because we don't have the funding. And we are reaching a critical point where the deals that we've been working on for years are getting stalled out. So as an intermediary, if you will, for the park system, we're all in this together. So that piece is important. The other two things I wanted to focus on are the Coastal Conservancy's Bay Area program and the Wildlife Conservation Board program. Prop 1, although it has a lot of funding for incredibly important efforts on watershed protection and our water system, the way that the funding programs have been established don't allow us to use funds for what we have traditionally done for land acquisition. The requirements to show that water diversions are reduced or avoided, that doesn't really work very well if we're just trying to go protect land in the upper watershed of a river. So we need the kind of funding that Prop 84, Prop 40 have provided to the agencies that we've worked with for years. We've sent a letter to our senators, 3 of them whom are on the Appropriations Committee, McGuire, Hill, and Beal, asking for an extra $50 million for the Bay Area Conservancy program. I think Mr. Garcia was copied on that. That's been our lifeblood, one of our best partners. And the Wildlife Conservation Board funding for wildlife corridors, we want to thank you for that. That gives us, as Ms. Salzman was saying, a chance to focus on wildlife and habitat as well. We are willing to vote here for environmental protection. Measure AA passed on the June ballot with over 70% of the vote in a 9 Bay Area county vote. In Sonoma, we're putting a half-cent sales tax in the unincorporated areas on the ballot for November for parks, for regional parks. So we hope the state can step up as a partner as well. Thank you.
My name is Rick Richards. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for California Association for Park and Recreation Districts, and also the Risk Manager for California Association for Park and Recreation Indemnity. Basically, CARPD has been around for almost 60 years. In the state of California, there's roughly 117 independent park and recreation and community service districts that would qualify to be part of our program. Of that 117, 99 actually meet the full criteria. Of that 99, currently we have 69 in our program. Of those 69 districts, we go as far north as Weed, California, Fort Bragg, California, and as far south as San Diego and Lake Cuyamaca. So we cover a broad base of community service and park and recreation districts. This bond here would not only help all our districts in varying sizes, but will be a direct impact to some of our smaller districts, such as Boulder Creek, which services roughly 1,500 people. Bear Mountain, which is in Lamont, California, which is the only park and recreation district in roughly 50 miles. The closest next one is in Bakersfield, California. They service roughly about 4,500 people. This bond, as it sits now, with the limit of $450 million and then 60% being cut for the park and recreation district, would basically give each one of our individual members in our districts $7 per person. That's better than nothing at all. But this is good, it's okay, but it's only a start. What we're asking for is not only for this bond to pass and all that we can do for it, but we're asking for future bonds to be implemented that will continue to grow our parks and give our children a place to play. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for holding this hearing today. It's really important. Jason Ryan, League California Cities. Our city council members, our mayors from up and down the state, they've acknowledged your guys' leadership on this really important issue. We recognize it, we see it, we're very appreciative of it. We've activated our membership, get folks out on the street to pressure those legislators, particularly those who may not be as favorable to this bond as they perhaps should be. Going into the last few weeks of session, we're going to continue to keep that pressure up, and hopefully we can get a positive outcome on the Senate side and moving on from there. The thing that I think we should acknowledge most really is the amount of money that you guys have set aside in the bond for those park poor communities that have often been left behind. It's very meaningful money that's in there now. And then also you've addressed the per capita allocation that's often needed to bring some of the other cities along. So those two are critical components. We really see the park bond as the second punch. In 2014, we had the water bond, which you guys played a very, very important role in, and we appreciate that. We see this as a follow-up to that. We've helped out the environment a great deal on Prop 1. We've helped out our local communities, water recycling programs, new infrastructure for key wastewater treatment plants. And this is the other half, that other important infrastructure that our residents rely on in our communities. So again, we stand with you guys. We're going to continue to fight that good fight, and we thank you very much for all of your efforts.
My name is Casey Arndt, and I am speaking for Audubon, California. I'd like to thank the author for his leadership to improve parks for all Californians, especially those who do not have access to clean, safe areas to enjoy nature. Audubon, California helps people get outside and connect with nature. They can experience the outdoors in Pickleweed Park, along a state beach, or in Yosemite. Audubon, California also works to protect the last remaining wild areas and sensitive habitats which have been decimated in the past century. We are honored to support Assembly Bill 2444 because it will provide critical investments in park and recreation areas and will improve and preserve wild areas for years to come. We believe it is important to pass in its entirety and support Article 8. Finally, I'm personally honored to stand here today as an Audubon educator that has facilitated youth bird walks right outside in Pickleweed Park. I know how important local parks are to our communities. Audubon, California offers its full support. Thank you for your time.
Crystal Cove was a recipient of funds from Prop 40 and from the Proposition Park 40 bond, which launched the first phase of restoration at Crystal Cove. This provided our NGO with the confidence to continue raising money to bring this project to completion. Since then, 29 of the historic cottages have been restored, and many now are available for overnight affordable overnight stays as well as for educational programming. Right now, Crystal Cove State Park has one final phase of 17 cottages to restore. It's one of California State Park's larger deferred maintenance projects. An estimated $26 million for this project, with approximately $8 million raised over the last 6 years. We're currently working with State Parks and Coastal Commission and University of California, Irvine to develop a coastal engineering lab and programs to study climate change and sea level rise. Without funds from Prop 40, Crystal Cove would have been a far different place today, and certainly would not be the thriving space for renewal and for the retreat that it has become so popular for people of so many socioeconomic levels. Without the investment of private donors, government agencies, California residents, none of that would have been possible. We understand that funding parks and outdoor spaces in California must be a shared enterprise between government, nonprofits, and the private sector. And it is our sincere hope that with AB 244, the state and its residents become an even bigger part of that investment team. Now is the time to reinvest in our state's natural and historic resources, to make important improvements and repairs, preserve visitor safety, and enhance visitors' park experiences. It's incumbent upon us as stewards of these resources to ensure their preservation. On behalf of those we serve, the Board of Directors of Crystal Cove Alliance strongly supports the funding allocation to the state park system for both deferred maintenance needs and capital improvements. At this point, a park bond helps NGOs like us help leverage other donations from our community leaders and the philanthropic sector. We applaud your passion and leadership for this important effort. Thank you so very, very much.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Sandy Bigelow. I'm here as a citizen with a vested interest in California and all our parks. I have the fortunate experience of living in the East Bay. So East Bay Parks is my background or is my backyard. This type of funding will certainly give other communities that same opportunity. I'd like to also thank the panelists because I want you to know that you have spoken to me and your dedication means a lot. Gonna back up to the state park. I started camping at Big Basin when I was 4 years old and continued to use state parks throughout my life. Fast forward a number of years I don't care to mention, and was shocked to hear of closures of parks. Not an acceptable thing for a native Californian, and I hope those who have moved to our state. My first goal was to let my politicians know by letter writing how I felt about that. Then came the opportunity to be a member of the California States Foundation. They speak well for myself and other groups. Park Champions was developed shortly after I became a member. That was my opportunity really to take ownership. It was all well and good to use the parks and as we all know, leave it in the same condition or better condition when you've gone camping. But the volunteer opportunities did two things. It gave me the opportunity again to take the ownership of parks, but also be hands-on with park groups. There was reference of checkpoints for how funding might be used. I assure you, if you look at any of the parks and you know the park staff, they know what needs to be done. I took the opportunity to volunteer in different parks, got to revisit some. Of those, I land mostly in Half Moon Bay. But if you look at the park staff in any of the parks, or you look at the partnerships like you see in China Camp, I assure you that the funding will be used properly. Volunteers can do great work, but they can't make plumbing work that doesn't work anymore. They can't do infrastructure that's needed for the state parks. Thank you for this opportunity.
Hi, Jennifer Savage. I'm the California Policy Manager for the Surfrider Foundation. And on behalf of our 20 chapters in California and our thousands of supporters, I wanted to say thank you for convening this hearing and for putting together this much needed piece of legislation. We have already submitted, along with our partner organizations, a letter of support, but I wanted to reiterate that support now. As a parent myself, I very well know the difference that open, safe, well-maintained space can make in a family's life. And as a representative of an organization dedicated to not only the protection of our coast, but also the enjoyment of it, I continue to offer our full-hearted support. We also are very appreciative of the inclusion of funding for climate resiliency in Article 8, and maintaining this is imperative for the state to effectively implement projects that bolster its climate preparation and security and resiliency. So I wanted to again emphasize our appreciation for that and to say thank you for this bill and that you have our full support.
My name is Arlen Weinberger. I'm the past president of Friends of Mount Tam. We were one of the parks that were not on the closing list, we're happy to say. I want to thank you both for this meeting and to say I, of course, fully support this bond measure. What I'm hoping would be the side effect of the bond measure is that it will raise awareness of the problem, hopefully in the governor's office too, because what we really need, in addition to this, which is wonderful, is we need a sustainable budget item to support the operating costs of the park. Where I work at with Friends of Mount Tam, yes, we have volunteers who do what rangers used to do, but we're really short-staffed. We need more rangers, more maintenance people, paid people, and a bigger operating budget. So I'm hoping that maybe, because I hope this will pass, and by a lot, that will, I don't know, reinforce the idea that parks are really important and need to be fully funded by the state. These are state parks, not private parks, and they need state budget funding. Thank you.
It's empowering for me and Mr. Garcia to hear your stories. Those stories are what we bring back to the Capitol, and we can then communicate and convey what we hear across California to make the case to build that support we need to place AB 2444 on the ballot. And so thank you for that, and of course, all of the advocates. I also want to thank, as many of you aptly did, Assemblymember Garcia for his leadership on this issue. Someone needs to carry the flag, someone needs to author the bill, someone needs to be engaged in those stakeholder discussions. It's arduous work, it takes a lot of time, and so I'm grateful to have him as a leader on this issue. He has graciously joined us today for this hearing. And he, of course, has a commitment from me to join him anywhere in this state to bring this message, whether it's in his district or somewhere else, throughout California, but also to hear from the grassroots about how a parks bond can best serve local communities. And that's a little bit of the magic, I think, in his approach and what I'm hopeful that we can accomplish with this.
I want to just say that we will continue the conversations in various parts of the state. We are very hopeful that this bill will get out of the Senate appropriations and will allow us to continue to engage at the ground level. One thing that I appreciate from the State Parks Department when they put forward the Prop 84 dollars was that there was a condition to ensure that the community stakeholders were involved every step of the way as it related to the application for those funds. Everything from identifying stakeholders to the design and planning of what the potential application end product looked like. And as a city that was one of the recipients of one of those grants, I took a great appreciation in that approach. And so that is the same approach that we've taken as it relates to this bill and our efforts to make sure that we can cover any and every possible area and corner of the state when it comes to funding the much needed park systems and our poor park communities of California that I hear today there are some significant challenges in this area as there are in a district like mine. So again, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, of course, your team, your consultant, the committee consultant, Diane, for her leadership, as well as everyone else who's been working on this on your committee. But thank you so much for your partnership, and let's go get this passed in the Senate Appropriations Committee and onto the governor's desk.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember, and thank you, all of you, for participating today and providing your input. Of course, the warm welcome for the visiting Assemblymember as well. Have a great day.